Hello and welcome to another tutorial. Today we're going to be looking at some information that helps to support part 3 of Unit 12 of the Level 9 Harmony course. And we are looking at Applied Dominant Chords and also Modulation. Now today we're going to continue just by sharing the screen and speaking about how to modulate to a new key. Now, modulation is different than an applied dominant or tonicization because with applied dominant chords, what we have to do is consider that the applied dominant is decorating the chord that it's attached to. So, for example, if you want to have 5 of 5, then we think of the dominant chord of a particular key signature, either major or minor key, and then we want to know that the applied dominant is going to be decorating that note. So if you, let's say the 5 of 5 in the key of C major, the dominant chord of C major would be G. But then if we want to think of the dominant chord of G, then that would be 5 notes away from G, which would be D. But then the dominant chord would be D, F sharp, A, C, because it is decorating the dominant chord of the key of C. So there's some important accidentals that are included. But this is also what we call a short-lived progression. Now, when we modulate to a new key, this means that we can permanently, for a short time, change key from one key to another. So if you look here, we can see how we're in the key of E minor for this example, 12.2. And we're in the key of E minor for a little while, but then all of a sudden the accidentals change, and then by the time we get to the first cadence, we actually change key to a different key. So first of all, we start off in the key of E minor, but then we modulate or we change keys to a new key. Now this modulation is usually confirmed with a cadence in the new key. So we start off in the key of E minor, but then by the time we finish off the first phrase, we have a cadence. This one is an 8, 6, 4, 7, 5, 3, or a dominant 7th going to the tonic in the key of G major. Now please note, there's a very smooth way we can transition from one key to another. Now this transition is called a pivot. Now what we want to think about is how first we have the music written in the first original key, but then how prior to any changes of accidentals, and also especially prior to a cadence in the new key, we want to think of a chord that's fairly strong in the key that we're coming from and the key we're going to, and then we use that chord as the pivot chord between the two keys. It's kind of like a chord that we use to move from one key to the other. Now in this particular example, in the key of E minor, the one chord is E minor. But in the key of G major, of which this musical sentence moves towards, the chord E minor is also the 6th chord in the key of G major. So we can actually think of this chord, the E minor chord, as actually having two functions. First of all, it's got a function where it's the tonic chord in the key of E minor, but also with it being the 6th chord in the key of G major, it can be used as a chord to translate or to change between the two keys. And then after that, you can see how the D natural shows up in beat 3 of this first bar, which is the first instance of the change of key, which then remains consistent. Now, when we get to the next phrase, we're in the key of G major for a little while, and we can see how, again, we have a pivot chord here, where we have the highlighted yellow. In this case, we are staying in the key of G major all the way up to here. But then we change to the key of E minor for the rest of the example, starting from here. So the chord E minor, which is the third beat of the third bar, is actually a really important chord because it happens right prior to the cadence. In this case, we have a half cadence going into the key of E minor. And also this chord is the 6th chord in the key we were coming from, the key of G major, but also is the 1 chord, which is the key of the tonic chord in the key of E minor. So it's a fairly strong chord. that can be used to transition between the two keys. So when we think of a pivot chord, a pivot chord is very, very important because it helps to transition between one key to another very smoothly. Let me play this example now for you. So we start off in the key of E minor with 1, 5, 6, 5, 7, 1. But that's also 6 in the key of G major. And then we have D natural, 4, V 6, 4, 7, 5, 3 to 1. And 1 stays the same. V 6, 5, 7, 6. But then we transition back to E minor. 4, 6 to 5. So it's very interesting how modulation really helps to create different decorations of accidentals, but also really helps to create richness in the writing. So something that's very important to consider is how when modulating, you want to think about picking the pivot chord at a certain point that's right prior to a change of key center, meaning accidentals that are consistent, and also definitely prior to a cadence. You don't want to have the tonic of the new key at the end of a cadence be the pivot chord because we've modulated or labeled everything and tried to pivot too late. You always want to try to pivot prior to the change of key. So I do hope this tutorial has been helpful for you to outline some of the various aspects, especially using pivot chords, and help to hear things a little bit more clearly as well. I look forward to seeing you for another tutorial very soon. And until then, thanks for watching and take care.